My high-heeled boots tapped over the cobblestones in front of Cardinal College on Harrington Street. There weren't many students hanging around on the frozen, crisp grass. They were all inside, presumably at lectures or studying somewhere warm. I dodged a few ambling shoppers as I hurried to Cardinal Wolsey's, the knitting and yarn shop that I inherited when my grandmother died. Or sort of died. She was now an enthusiastic member of the Vampire Knitting Club. I'd left my new assistant in charge of the shop while I went across the street to Frog's Books, where I'd put in an order. After puzzling over Christmas gifts for vampires who owned everything they could possibly want, I'd settled on newly released books. I didn't like to leave my assistant alone in the shop for too long. Her name was Meritanum, and she was an Egyptian witch who'd been trapped in a cursed mirror for 3 millennia. As a result, she had missed a lot of developments in the world. She was convinced, for example, that everything operated by electricity actually had a spirit trapped within it. I'd caught her trying to release a spirit from the microwave just last week. I'd been popping corn, and she'd become so convinced the tiny explosions were the witch banging on the door to be let out that she'd magicked the door open. I was still finding stray kernels of popped corn, like little ghosts, hiding in the dish drainer, the cutlery drawer, and under the fridge. At least Nix, my black cat, had enjoyed the experience. She decided that microwave popcorn was a cat toy in disguise. Mary was deeply suspicious of the cash register in Cardinal Wolsey's and the electric lights, but otherwise it was a pretty old-fashioned place. She couldn't knit, but then neither could I. We were both taking lessons from the vampires. I'd hired Mary as my assistant because she had nowhere else to go. However, now that we'd been working together for a few weeks, I'd grown extremely fond of her. She was always patient. I suppose being stuck in a mirror for 3,000 years would teach patience. She loved the color and texture of wool. I really thought she was happiest sitting quietly with her knitting. With the modern world being so loud and confusing, I could understand that. Unfortunately, December was a busy month at Cardinal Wolsey's, as knitters rushed in to pick up the supplies they'd need for their gift lists. I was surprised that knitting had so many procrastinators. I suspected there would be many a pair of knitting needles clacking together into the wee hours of Christmas morning. As I approached my little shop, warm satisfaction washed over me. The front window brimmed with a colorful display of sweater kits, appropriate as a gift for the knitter or as a project to be hastily completed by Christmas. There was an array of snuggly sweaters for those without the time or inclination to actually knit something. My favorite part of the display was the 4-hand knitted Christmas stockings hanging in front of a painted fireplace, complete with licking orange flames. The artwork was courtesy of Theodore, one of the vampire knitters, who, apart from being a former policeman, had painted sets for amateur theater productions. And curled up in front of the fire, almost as though she could feel the warmth, was my black cat and familiar Nix. I'd put twinkly lights all around the window and the painted fireplace, so my shop looked festive and inviting.